Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. This is episode 217, and we're going to talk about the common good, a topic which was the title of a course I used to teach at the university when I used to teach at a university. And so I thought I'd take a look on the web, see what is going on. I always suspected when I was at the university that this was sort of a kind of uh, indirect way of introducing collectivism, communism, um, all the Marxist ideals that is pretty much everywhere in the university. But I took it at its face. What is the common good? And of course, I had to choose from the reading list that was provided to us, but you were allowed um, a wild card pick. And of course, I would always teach Milton Friedman's Free to Choose, primarily because there were videos online. And so people who thought it was otherwise too boring, I would suggest that they would just watch the video as a primer. And if they're really interested in the ideas, they can go ahead and read the book, which takes a lot longer to get through, especially if you're not really familiar with economics in general, even though the way Friedman writes is very easy. If it's the first time you're reading something economics related, in spite of the fact that it doesn't have any of the math that the Keynesian economics teaches, it's still kind of a different subjectivity, and it's difficult for a lot of students to get through the first time. Anyway, so when I looked up the common good, which I never did when I was teaching because I kind of knew what was going on, but I thought I'd provide you some kind of orientation. So I'm first going to read some of the things that I found online. So the commongoodus.org, commongoodus.org says this. The common good is one of the nation's premier nonprofit, nonpartisan, pro-democracy organizations that promotes civil and informed discourse on major public policy issues. The common good provides opportunities for the dynamic exchange of ideas, taking partisan politics out of policy discussions. We encourage our leaders and our citizens to work together to solve our urgent problems. TCG has offered hundreds of events, programs, and screenings with top thought leaders to thousands of audience participants. And I looked through the list, and it's full of propagandists of anti-Trump liberals like New York Governor Hochul, Lindsey Graham, and all the usual suspects, right? So it makes it seem like it's sort of this Republican and Democrat, hey, we're getting together to talk about what is important for everybody in society, and it's all downhill from there. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has, and I'll just take snippets, I'll be jumping around. In ordinary political discourse, the common good refers to those facilities, whether material, cultural, or institutional, that the members of a community provide to all members in order to fulfill a relational obligation they all have to care for certain interests that they have in common, like roads, public parks, police protection. You get the gist, right? Including civil liberties such as freedom of speech, freedom of association, system of property, clean air, clean water, national defense. And then it goes, the terms public good and common good are sometimes treated as synonyms, and at other times, the modifier public is used to draw attention to the role of the state in the authoritative allocation of goods. As a philosophical concept, the common good is best understood as part of an encompassing model for practical reasoning among the members of a political community. The model takes for granted that citizens stand in a political or civic relationship with one another, and that this relationship requires them to create and maintain certain facilities on the grounds that these facilities serve certain common interests. Okay. And then there's the common good is an important concept in political philosophy because it plays a central role in philosophical reflection about the public and private dimensions of social life. And basically, how much private are you allowed to have in light of the public needs? And so there has to be a balance between private and public. So you kind of get this idea that the common good is basically this a way of thinking or conditioning and thinking about things which are good for everybody, right? Since they're good for everybody, then everyone should have to pay for it, right? And so you kind of get that vibe. And because certain things are so important, like freedom of speech, we need to have some people regulating it, which is kind of weird, but I guess it makes sense when you're in that subjectivity. All right, so the common good is supposed to be talking about what is good for everybody, and so therefore it must be protected by the government, of course, right? And this is the line of reasoning that you're supposed to have. I know that a lot of my, looking at the reading list that I was supposed to choose from, um, a lot of the readings were very socialistic in that sense, and they would highlight certain problems, certain weird situations where, of course, you need someone to come in and solve it for everybody, solve the problem, whatever the problem is. You need someone that has the authority to get things moving, and then you can solve the problem, right? And so that's the idea. And most of the instructors, because there's this strong Marxist, lean in all of this information that uh, people are learning in the university, you're supposed to conclude that, yes, we're supposed to become politically active to ensure that these issues will be prioritized and taken care of by the people who know best. And those are the people that we elect, like the Lindsey Grahams and Mitch McConnells of the world, right? So the course I taught, as I told you, was the common good. And the assumption is that there is a common good. And because it is good for everybody, everyone must contribute to support it because everyone's going to benefit, right? And so there is this hint, this sort of insinuation, implication of coercion. Everyone must chip in. We all agreed, so everyone has to participate because we're all part of a society. There is no room for the individual and individual priorities, right? And so you saw that, peeking out a little bit, like, yeah, the individual has a different set of priorities from the collective, but hey, we're all part of the collective, and so you have to have a balance, right? So your priority to yourself cannot interfere with whatever it is the common good. And so I would only talk about the common good at the very end of the class, right? So after I go through the whole 14 weeks of discussion, raising issues, trying to highlight what does this reading say. And I've talked about some of the readings in some of the earlier episodes of this podcast that I would assign. And I would say, okay, so this is what the author is saying. Now, normally what students are supposed to do is say, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do it, right? And that's basically how a lot of people will want to teach it, right? Or they'll say, what's the problem with this idea? And so therefore we have to clean it up and then we appoint people to carry it out. And that's generally, it seems, what a lot of people say, right? Because obviously this is a good thing. And so we have to work to achieve it. So the assumption is that there is discoverable common good. And so we all have to contribute to support it. Everyone's going to benefit, and so everyone has to chip in. There's a problem with this. When you declare what the actual common good is, you are erasing the process through which these things have become the common good, right? So roads, for example, okay? Roads. I mean, roads always existed everywhere. That's the common good. And people who didn't have roads, I don't know, like Native Americans, we got to give them roads, right? Clearly, they don't know anything about roads, but now they have to be forced to, contribute to roads, It's kind of weird, right? And so maybe you might say, well, they had roads, but the issue is that you're going to designate what is the common good, and then everyone has to chip in to pay for it. So we're erasing the entire organic process through which a lot of these ideas came about. Why is that important? Because it's not the end of development and organic development of new ideas. And so moving into the future, are we going to have more newer ideas that replace what we thought was the end and the best possible? right? Or are we going to continue to improve, tweak, revolutionize anything? So roads, parks, freedom of speech, all of that has to be controlled and regulated, you know, which is really what they want to do, but they'll say protected. Really, what they mean is limited, right? And so this whole process has failed. Uh, you know, we're still building roads in the same way that people did when I was a kid, which is why we still have potholes like we have when I was a kid, right? So that kind of situation. So in 50, 60 years, the technology has not changed when it comes to roads, right? And so there might be a little bit of a push here and there, a little tweak around the margins, but roads as a whole in the United States, as a whole in the United States, uh, on the whole, generally speaking, the tech hasn't changed much at all. And so this protection, this regulating of the common good has basically failed. And so, which has led to people doubling down and saying, no, we just have to spend more, or maybe we have to reform it, or maybe we need new leadership. No, the problem is that it is you take a process that resulted in things which a lot of people benefited from in society, right? A grassroots development, and you flipped it. And then you say, no, 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 from now on, it's going to be top down. We are going to tell you what the common good is. And so people have forgotten, that people worked themselves, right? They paid for it themselves. I don't know. I've talked about this before. You may have already seen this little cartoon where a guy is, in a factory and he's making tens of thousands of widgets every hour. And he yells out the window. He's like, how am I going to get these to the market? And then someone yells back at him and says, well, you got to build a road. And so, what a lot of people forget is that companies would have to build the roads themselves to get from the point of manufacture to the stores in order to sell them, right? And so it's the factory that's going to build the roads, hire the truck drivers, hire the drivers, build the retail outlets, or maybe even build other factories to take the raw product and turn it into goods and then ship them off to the retail stores and then sell to everyone. But the stores have to be located in places that people can access, which means that you need to build more roads. But then at that point, you can get other people on board, other people who are selling products and manufacturing things and shipping things to these same retail outlets, that now you have more people contributing to make these roads, and it's possible. Some people might say, that's impossible. Well, I remember reading an article years ago how a road was washed out in Hawaii. And so the people requested that the tourist town road be repaired. And they said, you have to wait 3 years, right? Because we're busy repairing all these other roads. Well, it was the only road to a tourist town. Without that road, there are no tourists. And so they would die after 3 years. The town would be dead after 3 years. And so what the townspeople did was they all chipped in, right? Because their livelihood depended on this road. So they all chipped in, repaired the road in a week, and they were back in business. Okay. And so, well, you have to and so clearly it was a lot cheaper when they did it themselves. It was a lot faster, and they were able to move on without waiting for the government. And a lot of people, seem to have forgotten this, that, even the FEMA thing, I said a couple episodes ago that, maybe what we're seeing, this FEMA response, it's not that they are deliberately standing down, but that is really how slow they are. That's how disorganized they are. That's how slow and obsolete the communication system is, because the people who are in charge did not get those positions because they were the most qualified, but they got those positions as political favors, as political payoffs for favors. Okay. And so they have no idea what they're doing. There is no incentive or desire to improve whatever it is that they're doing because they're going to move on in a couple of years, right? And so the whole system is broken. But if you flip it and go to the grassroots and we're like, we need a road now. Who's available to do it? Oh, you got some equipment to do it? Okay, can you do it? We'll pay you. And there it is. It's done, right? And so people have to start remembering that before the government inserted itself in our lives, we just took care of problems ourselves. It was cheaper, it was faster, and we never really gave a thought to it. Okay. But in some places, I think it's illegal. I mean, look at what you saw down in those post-flood areas. You had, National Guard helicopters flying over private relief depots and just blowing everything away. Why? Because if you give your donation, your contribution to a private entity, then it is not going to the designated public entities who see dollar signs, right? Like this is why I have this job, so that when this happens, I make a lot of money, right? And so I get to have glory for myself. And so you see that working, and so you have to get rid of all of the private entities so that you can rake in all that money. But of course, that's another bad economics lesson that I'm sure you're well aware of. The more people you have, facilitating and helping with this rescue and recovery, the faster people can get back to their lives, the faster you can rescue people, the less time people have to spend suffering, et cetera, et cetera. And so when people had to do it themselves, had to pay for it themselves, instead of saying, oh, the government will do it, who knows how much it'll cost and how much they're going to skim off the top for themselves. We don't do that, right? Because we just shift it off to the government. But if we have to pay for it ourselves, we're looking for the cheapest way of doing things. And other innovators, when they know that people are looking for a cheaper, faster way of doing the same job, they're going to come up with cheaper, faster ways of doing the same job. And so road work, it would improve, right? How to build roads that withstand flooding, stay dry in the snow, all this other stuff. People will come up with ways to make the roads better, right? And I'm not an engineer, I don't know, but I've seen these videos where they come up with these ideas where heated roads to melt the snow, lighting built into the roads, and so you don't need to look at signs, whatever, I don't know. Whatever is safe, whatever is good. Who knows? I don't know, but that's not in my purview. It's just knowing that it's possible. But in today's world, since everything is top down and agencies are run by people who are out of touch, as I just explained, then there's no incentive for innovation. Of course, we're still going to use asphalt after 60 years, right? They are only interested in who gets the contracts, right? And whether they be union members, pavers unions, road unions, whatever, right? They're the ones who get the contracts. And so the people who award the contracts, and that would be the politicians, the people who are elected, they use their office to pay back favors, right? By giving contracts to the people who helped get them elected. So why not reform the process? Because solving the problem is never the goal for these agencies. And so reforming the agency just means, okay, you're going to, neaten things up on the margin, but the fundamental problem is there. In other words, the problem is that it's a conflict of interest. If they solve the problem, then they don't have a job anymore. And so you have to make it look like you're solving the issue, working on an issue while never solving the problem, right? Whether it's homelessness, whether it's poop in the streets, that's what you're being paid for, to maintain the problem, control it in such a way that it will always be on the minds of the people, and for people to say, good thing we have a government bureaucracy to take care of this. This is why I pay my taxes, right? Right. Taxes are what you pay to live in a civil society or some BS thing like that, right? So what prevents also, not only why reform doesn't work, so why not just abolish it? Because it is protected, right? It protects jobs. Not only the government bureaucratic jobs, but also the union jobs, right? You saw that with the ILM, right? International Longshoremen ILA Association, right? The people unloading ships, right? They want to protect their jobs, right? And if they see the threat through, automation, then they're going to go strike. In other words, they're going to protect obsolete methods. Another reason why you're not going to, it's hard to abolish it is because of inflation, right? So because the prices of everything keeps going up, then the cost of, introducing innovative ideas also it's kind of weird. So you've probably seen those pictures where the roads that the Romans made, they're still around, but the asphalt, it doesn't even last a winter. Right. So are we developing as a society, or are we just protecting really bad ideas from year to year? Yeah, I know that it probably would be very noisy, uncomfortable to walk on cobblestone roads like at the Romans, but come on, we could probably do it a little bit better, especially by now. So, this common good idea is fundamentally a collectivist mindset, which prioritizes the collective over the individual. I knew that, and I would always say that in class. And so, when I taught the common good, I emphasized what went wrong when you took a collectivist approach, like this is the common good for everybody, and so therefore we have to all chip in and do it. Right. And I would show how it was full of waste, fraud, and abuse, and that the results were far worse than the original problem. And so through this, people, all the students, nearly all, 94% of them, could see that the solution is in freedom for each of us to prioritize our own needs first, and in that process solves a lot of other problems. So it looks chaotic, as Friedman would always say. It looks chaotic, but it results in spontaneous order, which other people have said, right? Chaos theory, I believe, right? So, and I've heard Bob Murphy talk about that, right? So it looks chaotic, like there's no one in charge. Oh my gosh, no one knows what they're supposed to do. But from that organic process where everyone is making choices and everyone else is reacting to those choices, and still more people are reacting to the original problem and how things are changing and how everything is in flux, eventually you see what is the best way of moving forward. But it's never the end. People are constantly coming up with better methods. So the freedom to pursue one's priorities, right, results in the spontaneous order that is impossible to imitate through authoritarian methods, which is why authoritarianism sucks, right? Because they're not interested in you. They don't care about you. They don't care if you are unalive. It doesn't, none of that matters. All they care about is their power and how they can skim off the top. So it's freedom, baby. It's always freedom. And through freedom, we can exercise our minds, solving our problems, gathering as much information as possible, sharing that information, finding out with whether or not our idea is the best and other people benefit from it too, or to realize that people have already improved on that idea because someone else thought of it. And so then you can build on that as well. And so freedom is always the solution. Freedom is what keeps society moving forward ever forward. And we can do away with these discussions of the common good. So in other words, I would always conclude the class by saying the common good is freedom, baby, right? It's always freedom. And 94% of my class would always say, you know what? You're right. Well, hopefully that was a little bit entertaining anyway, and I will talk to you next time.